The issue to be considered in the present case is whether the use of an equidistance line produces a cutoff effect for Kenya, not as a result of the agreed boundary between Kenya and Tanzania, but as a result of the configuration of the coastline. If the examination of the coastline is limited only to the coasts of Kenya and Somalia, any concavity is not conspicuous. However, by examining only the coastlines of the two states concerned to assess the extent of any cutoff effect resulting from the geographic configuration of the coastline may be an overly narrow approach. Examining the concavity of the coastline in a broader geographical configuration is consistent with the approach taken by this Court and international tribunals. In the two North Sea continental shelf cases, the Court examined the coasts of 3 states with Germany in the middle. The Court did so in the context of proceedings that had been joined, although the cases themselves remained separate. The Court noted that although 2 separate delimitations were in question, they involved, indeed actually gave rise to, a single situation. The Court emphasized that the fact that the question of either of these delimitations might have arisen and called for settlement separately in point of time does not alter the character of the problem with which the Court is actually faced. In both the Bangladesh-Myanmar and Bangladesh versus India cases, even though the issue was that of a boundary between the 2 respective states, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in the former case and the Arbitral Tribunal in the latter each looked at the concavity of the coasts of the 3 states as a whole, with Bangladesh in the middle. In the present case, the potential cutoff of Kenya's maritime entitlements should be assessed in a broader geographical context. The potential cutoff of Kenya's maritime entitlements cannot be properly observed by examining the coasts of Kenya and Somalia in isolation. When the mainland coasts of Somalia, Kenya, and Tanzania are observed together as a whole, the coastline is undoubtedly concave. Kenya faces a cutoff of its maritime entitlements as the middle state located between Somalia and Tanzania. The presence of Pemba Island, a large and populated island that appertains to Tanzania, accentuates this cutoff effect because of its influence on the course of a hypothetical equidistance line between Kenya and Tanzania, as shown by sketch map number 10, now appearing on the screen. The provisional equidistance line between Somalia and Kenya progressively narrows the coastal projection of Kenya, substantially reducing its maritime entitlements within 200 nautical miles. This cutoff effect occurs as a result of the configuration of the coastline extending from Somalia to Tanzania, independently of the boundary line agreed between Kenya and Tanzania, which in fact mitigates that effect in the south, in the exclusive economic zone and on the continental shelf up to 200 nautical miles. The Court recalls its jurisprudence and that of international tribunals, according to which an adjustment of the provisional equidistance line is warranted if the cutoff effect is serious or significant. In the view of the Court, even though the cutoff effect in the present case is less pronounced than in some other cases, it is nonetheless still serious enough to warrant some adjustment to address the substantial narrowing of Kenya's potential entitlements. The Court has affirmed that the achievement of an equitable solution requires that, so far as possible, the line of delimitation should allow the coasts of the parties to produce their effects in terms of maritime entitlements in a reasonable and mutually balanced way. This is an important standard to be used in making an adjustment to the provisional equidistance line. The Court, however, bears in mind the following principles. There is no question of refashioning geography or compensating for the inequalities of nature. Equity does not necessarily apply equality, and there can be no question of distributive justice. In other words, an adjustment should not produce an unreasonable result for Somalia. In order to attenuate the cutoff effect described earlier, the Court considers it reasonable to adjust the provisional equidistance line. In view of the above considerations, the Court believes that it is necessary to shift the line to the north so that from point A it follows a geodetic line with an initial azimuth of 114 degrees. This line would attenuate in a reasonable and mutually balanced way the cutoff effect produced by the unadjusted equidistance line due to the geographic configuration of the coasts of Somalia, Kenya, and Tanzania. The resulting line would end at its intersection with the 200 nautical mile limit from the coast of Kenya at a point B, with the coordinates indicated in paragraph 174 of the judgment. The adjusted line is depicted in sketch map number 11, now appearing on screen. In the final stage, the court checks whether the envisaged delimitation line leads to a significant disproportionality between the ratio of the lengths of the parties' respective relevant coasts and the ratio of the size of the relevant area apportioned by the line. As mentioned earlier, the relevant coast of Somalia is 733 kilometers, and that of Kenya is 511 kilometers long. The ratio of the relevant coast is 1 to 1.43 in favor of Somalia. The maritime boundary determined by the court divides the relevant area within 200 nautical miles of the coast in such a way that approximately 120,455 square kilometers would appertain to Kenya, and the remaining part, measuring approximately 92,389 square kilometers, would appertain to Somalia. The ratio between the maritime zones that would appertain respectively to Kenya and Somalia is 1 to 1.3 in favor of Kenya. A comparison of these two ratios does not reveal any significant or marked disproportionality. The court is thus satisfied that the adjusted line that it has established as the maritime boundary for the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelves of Somalia and Kenya within 200 nautical miles in the Indian Ocean described earlier achieves an equitable solution as required by Article 74, Paragraph 1 and Article 83, Paragraph 1 of the Convention. The court finally turns to the question of the delimitation of the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles. It is recalled that both parties have asked the court to determine the complete course of the maritime boundary between them, including the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles. The court recalls that any claim of continental shelf rights beyond 200 nautical miles by a state party to UNCLOS must be in accordance with Article 76 of UNCLOS and reviewed by the Commission on the limits of the continental shelf established thereunder. The court observes that both states have made submissions on the limits of the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles to the Commission in accordance with Article 76, Paragraph 8 of the Convention. The court notes that both Somalia and Kenya have fulfilled their obligations under Article 76 of the Convention. At the same time, the Commission has yet to consider these submissions and make any recommendations to Somalia and Kenya on matters related to the establishment of the outer limits of their continental shelves. It is only after such recommendations are made that Somalia and Kenya can establish final and binding outer limits of their continental shelves in accordance with Article 76, Paragraph 8 of UNCLOS. The court emphasizes that the lack of delineation of the outer limit of the continental shelf is not in and of itself an impediment to the delimitation between two states with adjacent coasts, as is the case here. The court observes that the entitlement of the parties to the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles are to be determined by reference to the outer limit of the continental margin, to be ascertained in accordance with Article 76, Paragraphs 4 and 5 of UNCLOS. The entitlement of a state to the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles depends on geological and geomorphological criteria subject to the constraints set out in Article 76, Paragraph 5. An essential step in any delimitation is to determine whether there are entitlements and whether they overlap.